Hey, let's get started again for our next class. It's been interesting talking about missionary methods and things of that nature, evangelistic tactics, all that kind of stuff, how that affects poverty, all that kind of thing. Now we're going to get into kind of the tail end of that discussion. If you look at it, I'm kind of have like a sandwich arrangement here. I got the preparatory material first, right in the middle. I got the how we do evangelize thing. Then you get on the back side of it, got like the other slice of bread type deal there. Uh, Today we want to talk about missionary sensitivity to local culture and customs. Now, when I first went to Colombia, I didn't drink coffee. I'd grown up in a family that didn't drink coffee. Um, it was almost a religious thing because the Bible did say abstain from strong beverages. Maybe that's why church coffee has a reputation for being so weak. Make it so clear you can see right through it. But and nobody drank coffee in my family. We were not coffee drinkers. We drink Kool-Aid, we drink water, we drink milk, but no coffee. Not even tea, really. I got down to Colombia, and Colombia is famous for coffee. If you know anything about Colombia, other than the drug traffic that was common for a while there, still is somewhat, but not like it was, it's coffee. Colombian coffee and Juan Valdez and all that. I didn't drink coffee. Hated this stuff. Juan Valdez. Coffee, 100% Colombian. Remember, I'll up your grade a letter so if you drink 100% Colombian coffee this semester. I wish I could. Colombians would drink it out of a little cup like this, a little Demetasi cup. This is one they use down there. They like this one. It's very common, very popular. Wasn't made for tourists, even as it says, Café de Colombia, Colombian coffee on it, Colombian flag there. You go to anybody's house without even asking, they'll serve you a cup of coffee. You just walk in the door, sit down, and immediately the lady of the house, if it's not already ready, will be out there preparing it, and she'll walk out and she'll give you a cup of coffee. I don't like coffee. I didn't drink coffee. She'd come out with her coffee, and at first, I turned it down. That didn't go over very well. You can probably imagine. Well, they'd run around and they'd maybe fix me some lemonade or something, usually with not boiled water because it would take too long to boil the water and cool it down and make lemonade. So they just run right out of the faucet. I think I mentioned to you I was awfully sick that first couple of years there and nearly died from dysentery and all. And part of the problem was I didn't drink coffee. What do we do then? Well, I think that there's usually a good reason why people do what they do. They have developed in their culture what they need to do to live relatively well in the area of the world where they live, with what is available to them. And so if we go in there as Americans and we want to act like Americans and we want to take our Americanism with us, we're going to have trouble. So when we go into a country, we need to be very sensitive to their customs, to what's important to them, to what matters, to the way they do things. And we need to adapt to the greatest extent that we are able to them and not demand that they adapt to us. Now, if you were back in the 1800s or really clear back into the 1500s up through the 1800s, the big debate in missiology was, should we go native or should we Christianize the natives? And by Christianize the natives, they often meant getting them to dress like Europeans or Americans, to eat like Europeans or Americans, to look like Europeans or Americans as much as was possible for them to do. And so you go into Thailand where they chewed the betel nut, they had black teeth. Well, they gave Christians they had to get those teeth scraped off and make them white. Not quite sure where in the Bible it says you got to have white teeth, but if you were from America or Europe, black teeth meant dirty. Well, when dirty, they chewed betel nuts, and that stained their teeth. It had nothing to do with cleanliness. In fact, the betel nut helped keep their teeth from decaying. So we would go in and we would expect them to dress like we would dress. If the native culture did not have the attire that Europeans or Americans considered modest, that was considered then to be barbarian or to be savage or even to be almost animal-like. And so they talked about what was the white man's burden. And I'm reluctant to even use that term because it sounds so racist. But the truth is, it is racist. And they were racist. They saw Europeans and Americans as the 10 lost tribes of Israel. We were God's chosen people. Somehow they'd figured out that we must be those 10 tribes that got lost somewhere. They went up to England and over to America and all that. And so they thought we were modern day, God's chosen people, Israel. And so since we were God's chosen people, everybody else was pagan, outsiders, savages. There were debates as to whether or not they were even human. And they justified the slave trade based on the fact that many of them said in that particular moment that black Africans were not human. That's pretty blatant. Now, you've probably heard of a guy named Charles Darwin, the evolution of the species. Guess what? He had all this evolution, and he put monkeys here and man here, and he put Africans halfway between monkeys and people. He thought they were the lost link. That's racist. But evolution as a theory is racist, because if there is evolving of people, some people obviously are going to be more evolved than others. Well, we know that's not true, but still people who will accept that that's not true will say they believe in evolution. That's like having your cake and eating it too, I guess. Clear back in the 1500s, there was this guy named Francisco Ricci, I think was his name, and another guy, what was his name? Valignano. And Ricci was in China. And he'd been in China for several years. And he had gotten in there, and at first there was very much of a resistance to anybody foreign or anything like that. He started dressing like Chinese. He let his hair grow long, and he braided it. As much as was possible for a European, he looked Chinese. Well, this Valignano showed up, and he wandered up and managed to make it up to the imperial city. And as he walks in and everything, here this Chinaman walks up to him and he says, "Hey, how's the pizza in Rome these days?" In perfect Italian. It was Ricci. Well, Valignano goes back and reports Ricci for having gone native, for having violated the trust. He wasn't wearing the robes of the Catholic Church, even though he was an ordained priest. And there was a big conflict about it. And was that acceptable? Was that not acceptable? Had he done the right thing? Had he done the wrong thing? The Protestants did the same thing. They'd go into Africa. They'd build their mission compounds. They'd put walls around them. They would live like Americans or Europeans did there. They would start bringing the Africans in and training them how to eat with a knife and a fork and a spoon and a salad spoon and a and a butter knife and everything else spread out just like it's supposed to be on the table. They thought that to be Christian, you had to be European. And I think most of us today would say, baloney. Bunch of hogwash. We know that that's simply not true. It isn't Christian to dress the way we dress. It's just the way we dress. I'll be dealing with modesty a little bit. I think that's tomorrow that I deal with that. We'll be talking about that tomorrow. So I'll get into this a little bit more tomorrow. But even our idea of modesty is not necessarily somebody else's idea of modesty. And what I consider to be modest may not necessarily be modest over there. And what I would consider to be immodest over there might be perfectly fine in their customs and in their culture. And so we need to be very sensitive to the cultural values of other people, how they look at life, what's important. We show up in a country where coffee is a national beverage and everybody drinks coffee. If we want to fit in, good stuff. We got to learn to do what they do. As you probably figured out, it took me a while, but I learned how to drink coffee. At first, I didn't like it, but the more I drank it, they'd serve me this Tinto cup, and I hated it, but I'd drink it. Well, when I started drinking their coffee, I stopped getting diarrhea so much. Stopped having so much trouble with dysentery. It just seemed to work out. After a while, it started growing on me, and I started liking it. And as time went on, I drank less and less pop and Kool-Aid and all that kind of stuff, and I drank more and more Colombian coffee. And now, I almost never drink a pop. I drink coffee, and I come back from Colombia with my suitcases full of 50 pounds of coffee to give away. That makes good friends real quick. And then I have enough for me to drink, and I drink it while I'm up here because I can't stand now this nasty, lousy stuff you Americans call coffee. So what's important to people down there? We ought to pay attention to that. We ought to try and figure out what it is, and then we ought to be very sensitive to it. Remember, I've quoted to you already a couple times. Paul says, I become all things to all people that I might by any means win a few. And I think that means that he adapted. We know that he adapted when he got to Greece. We know that he adapted when he got to Rome. He was trying to, as much as possible, adapt to the local cultures and customs wherever he went and do things the way they did it. That's why he went up to the Areopagus and he debated with the philosophers, because that's what they did in Greece back in those days. That's how ideas were disseminated and shared, and so that's what he did. So when we go into another culture, it's very important that we go in as citizens of heaven. We don't go in as citizens of these United States. Now, I'm not trying to say we're not patriotic. I'm not trying to say we don't value our country. We do. But by the same token, when we're in the church, that's the kingdom of Christ. That's what matters. That's where our true citizenship is. Paul says we're sojourners here in this earth. We're here for a little while. We're just strangers passing through, because our citizenship isn't on this earth. It's in heaven. And our birth into heaven is the day we're baptized into Christ, and we arise from that baptistry a new creature. And so from that day forward, our primary citizenship should be in heaven. And when we get to another country, we should be citizens of heaven, not necessarily, first and foremost, citizens of these United States. Now, we moved out into the jungle. People out there in that area of the country tended to be very strongly influenced with Marxist ideology. Very anti-American. In fact, Wycliffe would not allow their people to go into this town we were living in, a little town called San Jose out in the jungle, because they thought it was too dangerous, because it was too communist and too anti-American. But I went in, and partly we couldn't afford to ship in all of our junk from the States, and so I started dressing the way they dressed. I wore the cotices, the sandals made out of old tires and nylon webbing like what they all wore out there. I pretty much dressed the way they dressed because I didn't have that much clothing I took with me, so we had to buy clothing once we got down there. Been in language school for a year and then got down there. And so by the time I was running around down there, I looked pretty much like they did, as long as I didn't take my hat off. as long as I didn't open my mouth and talk. I wore a hat. You see me today on campus, out around campus, you'll see I'm wearing a broad-brimmed hat, sort of a cowboy-like hat. I'm not doing that because I want to play cowboys and Indians. I'm doing it, first of all, it protects me from the sun, which is why they wear hats, by the way. And they wear their broad-brimmed hats because they're living in the tropical lowlands. And it works. And I learned out pretty quick. If I didn't wear a broad-brimmed hat, I was blistered, literally, from the sun. Very, very quickly. Very, very often. So for all of those reasons, as you leave this country, you leave behind your American identity, and you become a citizen of heaven and an ambassador for Christ when you arrive there. If somebody starts talking bad about about America, remember it's not your responsibility to defend America. You start trying to defend Americans, oh no, that's all wrong. You're probably just going to make an enemy. You're probably just going to get a door slammed in your face. You might even get something far worse happen. If I tried to do that out in the jungle, I'd either been kidnapped or killed. So I didn't worry about that. I figured that wasn't my job. We were out in the jungle in a little while. The priest out there is very Marxist. And we'd been there, I don't know, a couple of months. He hangs this big banner up across the front of the church. And it says, "Be patriotic. Kill an American." I was only American for 100 miles. Pretty obvious who it was directed at. What'd I do? Well, I could have taken off running. I didn't. I decided I was going to learn to live down there with them the way they lived. I used the toothpaste they used. I wore the footwear that they wore. I walked like they walked everywhere they went. Things like that. I lived in a house just like what they lived in. My wife cooked over a gasoline stove just like what they cooked over. That's the way we did it. I went up to this priest. Went up to his office. He had an office there beside the Catholic church and everything. I walked in and said, "Hey, you priest here?" He said, "Yeah, I am." Okay. He wasn't wearing his garb, so he just dressed civilian. So I went, "Sure, yeah, I am." Okay. So yeah, I wanted to talk to you a minute. "Yeah, what's that?" And he says, "That sign up there, what's that say?" Oh, well, that's a kind of a political slogan. Yeah, what's a political slogan? I'm trying to play dumb. My wife always said I did a very good job at that, too good of a job. I knew what it said. What's it say? He said, "Well, it's kind of political slogan." And he says, "Well, what's it say?" He says, "Well, the Americans come here and they exploit everything. They take all the wealth and everything. They pay low salaries. They treat everybody badly and all that. So basically, I'm saying we need to get rid of them." And I says, "Well, are you talking about me?" "Oh, no, I'm not talking about you." We sat there and talked a while. He had the cook or lady or whatever he had around bring me a cup of coffee. And you know what? I drank it. I sat there and drank coffee with him. And he started spouting off his communist, Marxist ideology, liberation theology. He was big into liberation theology and all that. And I said, first of all, I said, I'm not rich. You can go see where I live and see what I have, and you'll figure out pretty quick I'm not rich. I don't have an airplane. I don't have a fancy house. I don't have, that time I didn't even have a motorcycle. I was using a bicycle to get around on. A bicycle to ride just like everyone else. That's it. Yeah, you're not rich. Obviously, that's not about you. You're not one of those rich, bad Americans like that. Okay, all right, fine. I says, "You know what I do out in the jungle? Well, I share the gospel. I preach, just like I suppose you're here to preach and share the gospel too." Yeah, they had actually worked with the Indians more than with the settlers that were moving out into the jungle. It was a mission to the Indian tribes that were out in that area. I said, "I go out and I sit down on a log and I teach people how to read. You ever do that?" "Well, they do in the school here." I says, "Yeah, but do you ever do that?" "Well, no, I don't have time." "Ah, okay. Well, maybe I shouldn't either," but I said, "They don't know how to read and I want to teach them how to read. I want to teach them how to farm better where they'll make a little bit more money. I want to help them." And it was pretty obvious I did. And so with that, I no longer had problems with him or with anyone else because I went out there as a citizen of heaven, and I was respectful and considerate of their culture and of their customs and of their values. And if you don't do that, you will fail on the mission field. God bless. Have a good day.